In the last lesson, we got as far as learning this movable major scale pattern. And I encouraged you to learn to find each note in this pattern by interval number, something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then at random 6, 7, 4, 8, 5, 3, 2, 4, 1. Now in this lesson we'll show you how you can play a functional bass line along to a great many different chord sequences by applying this knowledge. To demonstrate the principles we're going to apply, let's use Knocking on Heaven's Door as a well-known song with a nice simple repeating chord sequence. Here are the basic chords I might play on the acoustic guitar. The first and easiest approach to playing bass on a song like this is to simply play the root note of each chord on the first beat of each bar, like this. G 2 3 4, D 2 3 4, A 2 3 4, A 2 3 4, G 2 3 4, D 2 3 4, C 2 3 4, C 2 3 4. And if you listen to me playing this against the recording of my acoustic guitar chords, you can hear that it works okay. May not be the most dynamic bass line in the world, but it helps to support the sound of the chord changes, giving the chords definition and grounding the rhythm. So, outlining the root notes of each chord is the first and simplest approach to creating a functional bass line. And if you've got the rhythm chart of a song, this is easy to do because the root note is always the first part of each chord symbol. So for example, the root note of G major is G. The root note of D major is D. The root note of A minor is A. The root note of C major is C, and so on. It should be stressed that this is not only the easiest way to create a functional bass line, but is often also the best way. A great error that lead guitarists often make when they come to the bass is to try to make the bass line more interesting or more complicated. Less is often best when it comes to playing a good bass line. Having said that, it is usually worth experimenting with what you might add to just the root note. And the next step that is easy to do and runs no risk of sounding out of tune is to simply add the note an octave above the bass note, above the root note. Perhaps like this. Now, if you're working with a root note on one of the bottom two strings, as we have been doing, you can always find the octave 2 frets and 2 strings above. Which makes sense if you think that the octave is simply the 8th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which fingering you use to play the octave may depend on how large your hand is. I favour using the pinky, but some bass players I know prefer to use their 3rd finger. Try each option out and see which one best suits you. You may decide to use this trick for every single bar, or you may just use it as a fill at the end of each line. Here is what each of these options sounds like when supporting the acoustic guitar part. You can hear that they both function okay, but each has a different musical feel to it. Finally, for this lesson, there is one more note that we can safely add to almost any chord, and that's the 5th note relative to the root note of that chord. If you've been watching our lesson on how basic chords are formed, you will know that for the 3 main types of chord, major, minor and dominant 7th, the 5th note is always the same. This just means that we don't have to alter this note when the chord type changes from major to minor or to 7th. And the 5th note is even easier to find than the octave note. Relative to the root note, it's just two frets up and 1 string across. If we think about the major scale pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To prepare to use this, try playing the root, the 5th and the octave over each of the chords used in Knocking on Heaven's Door. For the G, the D, the A minor and the C. Again, we can either use this idea on every single bar of the song, maybe something like this. Or just as a fill at the end of each line, maybe like this. So there you had 3 functional ways to create a bass line that you can use along with any song that you're likely to be asked to busk along to. Now, I know from the feedback to the last video that I've upset some real bass players with this whole concept of instant bass playing. So I want to stress here that these ideas are simply offered as an easy way for existing guitar players to get started on the bass. But that once you do pick up the bass, you will very quickly realize that you've entered a whole new musical world. There is infinite scope to develop your bass playing, just as there is for developing your lead guitar playing or your rhythm guitar playing. And it's a fabulous instrument in its own right. I think you'll find there are many guitar lessons available, bass guitar lessons available on YouTube by real bass players who can help you take your bass playing to whatever level you desire. See you again soon.